Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Practitioner Tuesday Training. We're talking fascia today. Actually, we're talking about why I don't work with fascia anymore. I want to share with you my position on that. There's a lot of conversations lately about fascia. So let's get to the underbelly of it. I am glad to have you all here. Those of you who are here in the club seats, hi Cheryl, I see that are here, and all of you who are watching live on YouTube, hello. It's nice to have you.
Hi,
Open up the chat section. How you doing, darling?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So we're going to talk fascia today and why I don't use fascia as my focal point, and I want to explain exactly why. There have been lots of conversations, few conversations about, a small handful of conversations with practitioners about why isn't it fascia? Fascia's it. Fascia's the magic. And I agree with you. And I also don't work on it as my focal point clinically, and I want to share with you why that is the case, and give you some more intel about that. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I am your host for the hour, Gina Schatz. I am a integrated bodywork practitioner, and I've been full-time for a few decades now. So I'm going to tell you everything I know and teach it to you from the viewpoint that I have. And if that serves you to serve clients, that's amazing. That's what we're here for every Tuesday in Practitioner Training Tuesday, to talk shop, to talk functional anatomy, and to get ourselves to solve the problems, the chief complaints that our clients come with. And sometimes we do think that that chief complaint is driven by fascia, and that's totally cool. I'm just waiting for YouTube to populate the video so that I can see you guys. Do you guys see the video yet? Cheryl, are you on YouTube at the moment? You're looking down. I just wondered if
I'm
you're.
not, no.
Okay, no worries. It'll come up. I know it. It always does. So first off, before we dive into our talk on fascia, I want to welcome us to a new month. Every month we have a new focus here for Tuesday training. This month I'm going to share with you why I don't focus on some things. And so today, as I already mentioned, I'm going to talk to you about why I don't focus on fascia. In our membership club, we also have a new focus of the month, and that focus is client work and partnering to create better outcomes for our clients. And so, if you are in the club, then you'll recognize that the playlist, if you will, turned over a new leaf at the beginning of the month, as it does. So that's going to be our focus for the month here and there. And I'll do my best to tie them together because client work is also techniques and what we use for our clients to solve their problems. And with that, let's dive into, I still can't see you guys online. That's such a bummer. Oh, here it is. I'm just about to see it right now. I'm very excited. Isn't that interesting? Have you guys noticed like some tech stuff going on? It feels super weird lately. Somebody told me the other day that their
Hmm.
computer started doing, mine did too. It like shut off in the middle of what I was doing, but I could still hear everybody. But the computer was actually off. It was very
That's
strange.
weird.
I know. So I can see you and I can't see you, but I'm getting there. For those of you who are here on YouTube, send me a note in the comment section so that I know that you're here and that you're waiting. Maybe that'll populate the video on my end. And also thank you for those of you who are liking and sharing the video as I asked last week. I'm learning new things about robots and AI and how they are helping us and also how they may start to hinder us on a few things. One of the things that happens, which is why it's not populating yet on my device, even though I'm here on the channel, is that YouTube and other places are being inundated with bots. So YouTube doesn't even know that we're real unless you interact with the video. So
Hmm.
when you interact with it, then it will populate for everybody to see. So that would really help us get everybody at the same party at the same time. Yeah, I don't know why it's happening. All right, it is what it is. I'm going to keep trying as we talk, and I know it's super distracting to listen to me babble instead of get to the meat of it. And also, it's live, and I'm trying to get it all to happen so that I can be fully present to all of you who are here with me live. Because
I see it.
you do. Okay, good. It's
Yep.
helpful that it's happening. Thanks for checking. All right, let's find it. Shall we find it? I just closed it and opened it again, and now I have it too. See, I just needed to
There you
close
go.
and open it. Okay, guys, I do see that some of you are here. It's the other thing that I mentioned that I wanted to mention. My beautiful YouTube assistant who works on our clips and things when we're not together live shared with me last week that there were like multiple dozens of you watching online. I did not see that. In fact, right now it also tells me that's not the number. So I want to know that you're here so that I can say hello to you because it matters to me that you're here and we're just not getting the same kind of stats that we used to get. So hello to all of you who are watching live. I have the chat open. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them as we go. There might be some questions because this is a big topic. How many of you work with fascia? How many of you have studied fascia? How many of you work with it? How many of you are like, fascia is the connective tissue of all connective tissues, and we need to get to the nitty-gritty of it? And Gina, don't you tell me that it's not a good one because I will be in defiance about that. It's totally cool if that's your conversation space. I get it. I want to give a little tiny bit of I'm on your side with this conversation, and I'm also going to tell you why I don't work with it. I'm on your side because I love fascia. I'm on your side because I study it and I teach it, but I don't use it as my main focal point clinically, and I'm going to get to that. I also brag that I was at the first International Fascia Conference at Harvard. I like to say I studied at Harvard, but I didn't. I was just there for a weekend workshop. But still, nonetheless, it's a beautiful campus and it was a memorable experience for me. And as far as I know, the International Fascia Conference is still happening. So it was a big, big eye opener because it was one of the first times that we integrated our presentation. It was researchers and clinicians and physicians all in the same space talking about the same topic. And it was this open forum dialogue, which is not news anymore. I've been in many of them since, but it was fascinating to hear the researchers say, well, this is how the fascia shows up in the lab. And then the practitioners to say, yeah, but that doesn't actually work on a human, right? Like it does, but there's like a need for translation in there. So we learned a ton by cross-referencing like that, which brings me to another highlight on why I think partnering is so important. There is none of us who knows everything that there is to know. Doesn't matter how long you've been a practitioner getting excellent results. Like I put myself in that camp. I don't know everything that a researcher knows. And it doesn't matter how amazing your research is and how much grant funding you get because of your amazingness. You're not a clinician. You don't actually work with moving bodies, probably, if you're working in a lab. It doesn't make one of us deficient. It makes us powerful together. And that's the concept of partnering. Can you humble yourself enough and open your earballs enough to be open to somebody else's information about the same thing that you know? Because then you'll know more, because none of us knows all of it. So that was one of those experiences, and I really learned a ton about the nature of fascia, and the science numbers really mattered to me. It did help me make changes clinically. One of the most famous ones famous because I've been talking about it for 100 years, is the 49-minute mark. So the 49-minute mark when it comes to fascia, I learned at that first International Fascia Conference. I have been preaching that ever since. It's a perfect example of how learning from someone else gives me more power in my knowledge. And then vice versa, those same researchers were listening to us who were clinicians and going, oh, wait, it does that in the field? Huh. Okay, well, let me go back and study that a little bit more and I'll come back to you with some more information. And that information takes a long time to reach us, guys. That information I've been told by a colleague of mine who's a researcher and a double PhD that it takes 5 to 10 years to reach mainstream. Just this weekend, I heard my friend and colleague Jules Mitchell say it takes 17 years for science on mechanics to reach mainstream. So whatever you're hearing that's new and trendy is actually old news. And you get to implement it right away and then be open to learning something new. So that 49-minute mark was the thing that I learned all the way back then, still holds true now, and we need to keep amassing our knowledge about that. But as far as the love of fascia, the science went like this. If you hold fascia in a particular position for 49 minutes, the fascia binds in such a way that it requires 20 to 30 minutes of opposite positioning to undo the bind. And if you hold fascia for 50 minutes, one more minute more, 50, that one more minute more mark held fascia that creates a bind now requires 3 to 4 hours of opposite positioning to undo the bind. That's gigantic information. That was before, I don't even know if I had a cell phone then. I mean, it was a long, long time ago. I mean, I might be dating myself. Of course, I had a cell phone, but you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have a smartphone then. So, the idea that then we knew that sitting for a long time was going to change the fascia around our psoas. Now we definitely know it because we're all sitting more. We're now all online. Hello, here we are online. I love it. And also, we now look down at our devices a lot because we all do have smartphones, which they say are not, it's like tongue in cheek that they call them smartphones because they make us dumb. But I digress. That number matters so much when you have not done the research because you're not a researcher, you're an expert practitioner, and you want to support your clients in best practices because you just did fascia work with them or you just did something to muscles that were affected by bound fascia. When we can create awareness in our clients to stop sitting for more than 49 minutes in a row, and that's not even going to happen here because we're here for more than 49 minutes, noted. When we can deliver that message, we're actually informing them with information from a researcher that helps them have a better life. That's amazing partnering. And I do believe 100% that that's true for fascia. I've tested it in my own life. I used to commute between cities and I would test it if I was on a road trip version of that commute, and it absolutely changed the game for how I felt at the end of that trip. Okay, so again, I'm on board for the fascia game, and I still don't focus on it clinically. Let's talk about why. So for those of you who do use fascia, I don't see any comments here about that, but I'm guessing that there were a raise of hands. For those of you who do focus on fascia, you probably already know that there are two different layers of fascia, deep and superficial. And if you're learning this for the first time, also cool because you get to know it. Just because I don't use it clinically doesn't mean I think we shouldn't know it. I think we should know it so that we know when to address it and when to move on. The deep and superficial layer of fascia are akin to an orange. So if you think about an orange and the rind around the orange is like our skin, and directly underneath, if you were to peel some of that rind off the orange, directly underneath it, there's a pith that connects the orange to the segments of the orange peel, excuse me, to the segments of the orange. That's like fascia, directly underneath our skin. We have it. And it's important. And it those of you who study it and love it, it's magical. It looks like it's magical stuff. And the way that they share it with us through cadaver studies is really interesting because it needs to be preserved in a very specific way for it to not dehydrate completely so that we can actually study it, which is one of the reasons why when they figured out how to do that, it became such a huge eye opener because it was this tissue that we hadn't yet up until then been able to explore fully. So we know that even directly underneath the skin, where the fascia, where the superficial fascia lays, it's directly related to hydration. We know that we're mostly water more than any other element, and we need to be hydrated for all of our systems to work, including fascia. It's not specific to fascia, but it's definitely directly related to fascia because we know about it through this tissue now that we've been able to study it in cadavers. And that's difficult. Like it's hard to study it in alive people. We don't really want to be poked and prodded on an operating table for exploration's sake. And then the tissue changes as soon as the body transitions. So important to know, everybody drink your water. Hello, cheers, have a drink. For a lot of things, not just your fascia, but definitely fascia. And then deeper in the orange, once the peel is all off the orange and the segments are holding that orange together, notice that the orange is still being held together, even though the skin sac around it, the peel, is no longer there. How does that happen? By fascia. So fascia is holding the segments of the orange together underneath the skin, and it's also holding the segments of our vessel together underneath the skin. Once you take the skin off and the superficial layer of fascia goes with it, there's more, just like there is inside an orange. So that's really important to consider that fascia is everywhere, from the top of the orange all the way around to the sides to the bottom of the orange, and then also in between, which we're going to talk about here in a second. In our body, it's also at the top of the orange, at the bottom of the orange, and everywhere in between. Really important. Also, at the International Fascia Conference, they told us that the density of the fascia was such that non-testable, but theory enough, that the density of the fascia was such that if we were to take away all the skin and the bones, the density of the deep fascia would still hold us erect. Again, not testable, but interesting to consider that they found it to be that dense, that it has that much power in it to not only hold us upright, but oppose gravity. The other non-testable theory was that if they took away the superficial layer of, they took away the skin, excuse me, and they had just the superficial layer of fascia there, that our features would still show up just as they do. Because our fascia is molded around these features, and if the fascia was still present, we would still look like we do without skin. Again, non-testable, that shouldn't be tested on humans, but interesting to consider. The shape of the orange still stays there when the skin of the orange is removed, and the orange still holds its integrity and its identity. You can identify it as an orange even without the fascia holding it together. It's kind of fascinating to consider. Same in our body. Cool. Going back to the orange without the skin on it, we know that as we look at the orange, there's all these different segments of orange, like these little half moon shapes that make up an orange. Yeah. They're being held together by fascia, and when we peel those two orange segments away from each other, they feel a little sticky, like they're being held together by something more pith. In our body, that would be more fascia. So our fascia is not only underneath our skin and around every muscle, it's also holding our organs in places in our torso. So think about it. We know that we have miles and miles and miles and miles of intestine. So what prevents those miles of intestine? What prevents them from showing up in our throat when we go upside down into downward dog or into a handstand or into a cartwheel? What prevents them from ending up in our throat? Because the fascia is holding them in place against the abdominal wall. There's types of connective tissue and fascia, name different things. In the abdominal wall, it would be the omentum, that literally attaches like a thumbtack, takes the intestines and holds it onto the back of the abdominal wall so that the intestines can be here and have movement available to them, but not move up into like the rib cage. That's important to know. Fascia's carrying a really important role in the body. I hope you can hear my affection for it. I have nothing but respect and affection for what it does and where it is and how powerful it is. And I still don't focus on it clinically. And I'm going to continue on why. You guys buying this? Cheryl, this is all review for you at this point, right? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, good. I love it. I love that it's review. It's good to review.
Always good to review.
Always
Yes.
good to review. And then we have good foundation. It's a good way to learn as well. If you're like, I know this, I know this, I know this, then your brain is like, I'm winning, I'm winning, I'm winning. So that when you're hit with new information, it doesn't landslide you. It actually makes sense. You have some bandwidth to consider it, right? So the way we learn, we don't have new ideas coming from our brain. This is just a recall organ. It's going to recall everything you know. And if you're faced with something new and it doesn't land, your nervous system will reject it. So creating this foundation for learning is a great way to do it. I always recommend rewind the tape back to what you do know and then move forward so that you can solve whatever new problem you're facing, new challenge you're looking to solve. Okay, so I like to use a bag of spaghetti when we think about fascia around muscles. And the idea here is that the spaghetti inside the bag are the striations of the muscles. These are the muscle fibers, if you will. If they were elastic, like the rubber bands that are on this bag of pasta, if the spaghetti was elastic, it would connect towards the middle when insertions move toward each other and it would bind up in the middle. That's the belly of the muscle. And then when the muscle's lengthening, they move away from each other and then they start to look like spaghetti strands, muscle spindles in their original form. Of course, spaghetti is not elastic unless you cook it and then you can play with it on your plate, but then it's just a different constitution altogether. But that said, the pasta in the bag are the muscle spindles. Cool. The bag itself, though, is the fascia that is like a sac around the entire muscle. So every muscle has a sac of fascia around it, and an end point to every muscle. That's important to know because at the end point of the muscle, this spaghetti being a muscle, this is the end of the fascia and this is the end of the fascia. But just like this bag that came off of a manufacturing conveyor belt, it was originally attached to another bag on its other end. And then during the manufacturing process, all of these bags of pasta, each one of these muscles was separated from the one next to it. That's how we came home with just one bag of pasta instead of all of the bags of pasta. But in the body, the bags of pasta, the bag itself on the pasta remains connected to the one above it. It doesn't get separated like spaghetti in a manufacturing plant. This fascia bag around this muscle connects completely with the fascia bag around its adjacent muscle, which takes us back to this picture of fascia runs in a continuous sheath from head to toe, and because of its density, may be able to hold us upright all on its own, even without bones, because it's connected head to toe. And that's really important when we start thinking about symptoms. Are we focused on the area where it started, or is the fascia up here symptomatic? We know that this is symptomatic of something here because we all know the math that it used to be 80% of pain in the body, musculoskeletal pain in the body is referred from somewhere else. Now it's upwards of 90% of the pain in the body is referred from somewhere else. So if I have symptoms upstairs here and I find fascia here unhappy, I have to look down here 90% of the time to be able to find the source of that. So I'm already not completely focused on fascia alone. I'm focused on its relationship with itself. So there's step one about why I might not just focus on a fascia symptom, but there's more about why I don't do that. In addition to the spaghetti strands and the sac of fascia around it, in between each of these spaghetti strands or muscle spindles, there's also lighter bits of fascia, just like there is inside the orange segment. So you know how you have the orange, you peel off the skin, and there's pith that you peel the skin away from the orange. And then you take the orange segments and you peel them away from each other, more fascia. That orange segment is like a muscle, one muscle that had fascia around it, connecting it to the next one. But then when you open up that wedge of orange, I don't know if you've ever studied them. I like to stare at it and because they're beautiful. They have like little teardrop shapes of segment in that orange wedge that were all connected that looked like one until you peel them apart and you're like, oh, they actually are separate little entities in there, but they're all together like they're one, just like the spaghetti strands in a muscle itself. So this fascia just keeps going and keep going and keep going. At this point, I hope you hear me that I also understand how that could be compelling enough that it's got to be fascia and only fascia and nothing but the fascia. And I bought into it too until I realized it didn't solve the problems I was trying to solve. So I studied myofascial release with John Barnes ages ago. Love it. I was the recipient of Rolfing for many, many years. Love it. And I also did my own work with fascia when I was getting my third license in New York City. They do a lot of work with fascia in their school there. Studied it again. Every single time I learned something new and beautiful about fascia. That's why I have all this information about it. I'm on board. I love fascia. But here's where it doesn't solve all the problems. Here's why I don't use it as a focal point for all of my treatment plans. Fascia has a specific and intimate relationship with the muscle that it attaches to and the next muscle upstairs and downstairs from it because it's all connected. Therefore, if I focus only on the fascia and not the muscle that it's in an intimate relationship with, I haven't resolved the problem. Fascia also has a relationship with the orientation of the spine, especially the lumbar spine, as we talked about the omentum holding the organs in place against the abdominal wall, against the muscles that make up the abdominal wall and all the other connective tissue, which are directly impacted by the alignment of this spine. If this alignment of this spine is not optimal, neither will anything that's connecting to it, which means if I'm only focused on the fascia, I haven't addressed the alignment. But there's more. In addition to the relationship between muscles and fascia, in order to have fascia completely cleared, you've got to bring restored function back to the muscle that it wraps around. So I've heard a few times in the last week folks who are very well skilled in fascia work, and I wish Gary was here today too, because I know he's a big fascia guy. Very well skilled in fascia work, and they do all kinds of work with fascia. And inevitably, those practitioners share with me, it feels amazing while my client's there. They love it. It's easy for me to do. It just doesn't last. Right, it doesn't last, which is why I don't focus on it clinically. The work that I was up to was to get it to last, not just have my clients feel good while they were with me and for a short period of time after they left. That felt good for like a year working, but then after that, it didn't feel for me complete enough. It didn't feel purposeful enough. I don't believe that we do get to stay in pain or have a redundancy with our pain and recurring symptom cycles. I don't believe that's true. I largely believe the opposite. This body design, this alignment of structure, and all of the elements inside of it, including but not limited to fascia, are all designed perfectly. And when all of them are in their original design, there's no pain because we weren't born with pain. We were born without it. So I don't believe in the redundancy of treatment. And when we work with fascia, there's a recurrence. And there's a recurrence for a reason, several reasons. One of them is, as I already mentioned, you get to address the muscle beneath it because there's an intimate relationship with the fascia and the muscle spindles and how that muscle responds. In order to work with that muscle, though, we don't want to just do myofascial release work and then get someone back up into a exercise routine. That doesn't completely restore the muscle use. What completely restores the muscle use is optimizing the muscle and its lever and all the other muscles of reciprocal inhibition, which we know are impacted by the fascia because the fascia is connected to all of the muscles that are in that lever and reciprocal inhibition. If you haven't restored the function of all of those muscles and just made them move, which is not restoring it, you haven't actually changed the relationship between the fascia and the muscle. You've only done one of them. But now here's the really interesting part. When we address fascia, I like to teach the way, fascia, I like to teach like a stick of butter, only in constitution only, not the way it's shaped, not what it does, nothing like that. I already shared with you what it does and how it's connected. But think about a stick of butter that you would find in the refrigerator section of the grocery store and in your own refrigerator. You take the wrapper off that stick of butter that's cold out of the refrigerator, and you put that cold stick of butter on a plate and you set that plate out on the counter. And in not too long a time, 20 or 30 minutes, that stick of butter will now be completely different in its texture, right? You take the stick of butter out of the refrigerator and you could whap a butter knife on it, and the stick of butter doesn't change shape at all. It's cold, it's got a form to it. That's what fascia is like when it binds. It's cold, it's got a form to it, hence the bind in it. But then when you add just a little bit of heat to it, warmth, room temperature only, I'm not sticking a blow dryer on it, I'm not sticking the stick of butter in the oven, it's just room temperature. The stick of butter now completely changes constitution. And if I were to take the same butter knife with the same amount of force and whack it on that room temperature now stick of butter, there would be dents in that stick of butter from the butter knife. Because when fascia is warmed up, it changes, it responds differently. That's why, for those of us who do manual work with fascia, it's a manual hold. to add room temperature to the tissue, and a slight 45-degree angle, which changes the shape, undoes the bind of the fascia, just like room temperature butter stick and the butter knife changes the shape of the now warm fascia. That's amazing. It's literally that easy. It's awesome. And that makes it really attractive to think, oh my gosh, it could just be that easy. I could just release the fascia and everything will be better. Simon, I'm glad you're here and I'm glad the 49-minute rule worked for you. But here's the thing about that stick of butter. If you take the stick of butter out of the refrigerator and it's got its shape and you stick it on the counter and it now gets warm and you haven't actually moved it with anything, a knife or the muscle inside of it, you haven't moved it or made it change. When that stick of butter goes back into the refrigerator, it literally returns itself back to the same shape it was in when you found the bind in the first place. You can warm it up all you want, but if you don't change its relationship with the muscle that's underneath it, it will return itself back to the stick of butter because that's where you left it. Just because you warmed it up doesn't mean you changed it. Just because you did the myofascial work doesn't mean you changed the fascia and how it moves in its relationship to the muscle that it's around and all the other muscles in the reciprocal inhibition orchestra. Okay, so now we're starting to get somewhere. This is another reason why I don't just focus on fascia work and call it one and done. Now, if you're not doing manual work with fascia and you're using, some type of device, I know we know what they are. I'm not drawing shade on them whatsoever. I actually use them myself. But if you're using a technique with a device in your space to do fascia work, it might be um, that you are thinking that the device is doing something different than what you could do on your own. And I'm here to tell you it's a replacement for what you're doing. The device itself, therapy ball itself, or the roller, or whatever you're using, is not changing the fascia. The only thing that changes the fascia is the muscle that it's in relationship with. So then it takes us back to, are you balancing lever systems? Are you aware of synergistic muscles? Are you bringing them into the mix and have you corrected the balance of all of those muscles in the lever? Not meaning to overwhelm you at all or feel like I'm pile driving you, but that's why I teach the courses that I teach, because that functional anatomy is what actually got me to create lasting change around muscles that were related to fascia that was now bound. And that takes me to the very last point. When you find that fascia is the culprit, the symptoms all point to bound fascia. The 49 minutes is real, Gina. My client sits for a living or they do something else that's held for 49 minutes. You told me, Gina, it's 49 minutes, it's the fascia. Great. My question back to you is what caused that fascia to bind in the first place? 49 minutes of sitting, cool, but what position was it in? And if it wasn't from a 49-minute hold and you have fascia that's upset for some other reason, what caused that? Because if you haven't gotten to the cause of the symptom, you're still treating the symptom, which is bound fascia. Nothing in this beautiful, perfect design says that we're going to have spontaneous misbehaviors of all of this beauty. And we have no idea why, but the fascia is just going to be a jerk. And it's going to bind enough to create a whole lot of problem. And so all we need to do is unbind it. I'm here to tell you that's not true. This vessel was designed to move, which means it wasn't designed to move and then be inhibited from that movement. It was designed to move. It's other things that we're doing that are doing the inhibiting. So what is the thing that we're doing that's the cause of what's inhibited, not what is being inhibited? You got to go further in your treatment plan around that. Otherwise, you will find yourself in rinse and repeat. I found bound fascia. I used my method, my school, my skills, my tools, my whatever it is, my myofascial release or my therapy balls, and I released the fascia. And my client definitely felt better. They looked better. Their posture improved. They were able to go back to their workout. They were able to walk out of my massage space without pain, but it didn't last. Right, because the source of what caused that binding that you spent your good effort to undo, the cause of it wasn't addressed. And you got to go there if you want to fix it. Otherwise, you're just rinsing, repeating, and hoping that the fascia doesn't bind next week. If you don't know what caused it to bind in the first place, you're on a hope plan, and a hope plan is not a treatment plan, which is why I don't only focus on fascia as part of my treatment plan. In fact, I rarely do. I rarely do because any room temperature movement is addressing the fascia. We already said that. If this is the movement that happens, putting my hands on the body to quote, warm up the fascia, the stick of butter, and just a 45-degree angle with just a little bit of pressure is enough to unbind it, then wouldn't it make sense that if I'm up and moving around, that that would also be addressing the fascia? Yes. And then I have, and if this is coming up for you guys, please ask me the questions. I'd rather answer your question than just give you a bunch of intel to listen to. I'm asked then when folks are asking me questions, well, yeah, but if movement was enough and that's all that was needed, then how come I still needed to do my fascial release work? Because you're working both. You're absolutely working both. You are working both the fascia and the muscle. So maybe the fascia needs a little bit more and it also needs the work of the muscle. And maybe the muscle needs to move a little bit more and it's also affecting the fascia. That's the point. To take something that is as systemic in our body as fascia and just extract it out like it's the only detail to look at is a tunnel vision approach that is why you're getting rinse and repeat symptoms coming back. Because fascia on its own doesn't act like that on its own. So why treat it on its own? The math doesn't math. It's why I don't work on it as the sole source of my treatment plan. Okay, I feel like I could go on. And I would also love to just answer questions and hear what's coming up for you guys around fascia. Do you work on fascia? Do you not work on fascia? Do you find that it is absolutely everything that you need? Is this bringing in new information for you? For those of you who are here, Simon and the others, if you want to add your questions and commentary in the chat, I feel like this is a conversation that we could all learn from together. And rather than being, sort of dismissive of another type of treatment, which is not my intention here, what I really want to do is just answer it. I want you to get to the source and I want you to get to the solution all at the same time in the same treatment, not just symptom chase. Cheryl, you got any intel on fascia? Do you have a different relationship with it now? I know a lot of this is review for you as you're level 2 in the Schatz method land.
Well, I'm hearing things again, and it always sounds differently. Hearing things a few times over.
Yeah.
I really liked that you reviewed, or for me, it was review of the bound fascia as a symptom, and I think that really kind of I heard it a little differently, that it is a symptom, and going to what is the cause and the source of that symptom, which obviously, because the fascia and the muscle are so connected, that moving the muscle is going to affect the fascia. Mm-hmm. So with some of the mindful movement that I do and I teach is a lot of slow, intentional movement that I feel affects the fascia mm-hmm. in that way, and it always feels good. It's a mm-hmm. really feel good kind of movement, mm-hmm. Different from lifting weights or even yoga or Pilates. It's just like almost like a dance slow type of movement. Mm-hmm. So I just kept thinking back to how that movement and how it feels and how it must affect the body as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that class sounds delicious. I want to take that class. Sounds great.
Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah, I love that. So you're noticing that has the information you have about fascia changed the way you instruct that class?
Um, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, I think the just being hydrated makes a difference on how the fascia is its ability to move and
Hmm.
how fluid the movement can be.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I really strongly advise hydration
Hmm.
for fluid movement.
For sure. Yeah, we started with that, right? Like just hydrating could be the answer. Maybe we don't need to slave labor over a client's structural apparatus to get them out of discomfort. Maybe they just need water.
Yeah,
So then why are we spending a whole treatment 60 minutes making their muscles respond electrically when they don't have enough water in them to be able to do that? And the same thing goes for their fascia.
right. Because the body's going to just take it right back to the original form it was in.
Exactly. Stick of butter again. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Simon, I am fascinated. Oh, good. And muscleinated. I like that you're making up
Fascinated.
words.
I like that.
Yeah, right. Fascinated. What about the nerves? What about the nerves, Simon? What's your question about that? What about the nerves? Am I talking about muscles and nerves? So I don't know what your question is specifically, but the nerves do run through the muscles and they have a very organized pathway. For those of you who've seen like the Body Worlds exhibit, they're literally everywhere. They're not separate. However, the thing about nerves is while they are pervasive and everywhere, they like their pathway to be assigned to only them. I jokingly say a lot that nerves would never make good New Yorkers. They don't like to be bumped. I remember I was just talking to a friend the other day. In all the years I lived in New York City, I never went grocery shopping without being bumped. I know it's a double negative, but you just got used to just people bumping you. And I recognized it because here I'm not in New York at the moment, and when I'm here and somebody bumped me the other day, I was like, because I just wasn't used to feeling that. I wasn't upset that they bumped me, but I was just startled by I wasn't used to having that intake on my own person, which in New York you just get numb to it after a while. You just bumped all the freaking time. So nerves would never make happy New Yorkers because they don't get used to it. They don't like having their pathway infringed upon, which means that muscles that aren't moving fluidly and fascia that's bound would have an impact on the nerves because the pathway that the nerves want to live in is now being impeded in some way or congested or it's not an open runway, for example. So another point that you're bringing up here, while we don't work directly on nerves, you shouldn't, you are working with the nervous system first, and the pathway of all the nerves is part of that. So if you're having nerve responses, rather than throwing out arbitrary diagnoses with folks, maybe it's that you need to restore the lever system that this bound fascia is affecting so that the nerves can then be happy. That's very possible, right? So in an instance, let's say of like a herniated disc, if someone has a small herniation that doesn't require surgery, the nerve, of course, is going to be affected by that because when the disc when the disc herniates, the nerve that lives in the space that comes out of the spinal cord is now going to be impeded by the disc space that's now in the nerve's pathway, right? The nerve doesn't want its pathway impeded. We've already said that. So the disc itself could also create nerve. That's why like lumbar herniations often come with a side dish of sciatic pain. Cool. Taking that a step further, though, when this disc herniates, the musculature that connects the vertebra to each other, and there's many of them, the paraspinals and how they all relate to each other, those muscles now go into distress from the interruption of the stability of the axial skeleton. And now those muscles are under duress, also impeding or instead impeding the pathway of where those nerves run in. When muscles are in an antialgic or in like an acute responsiveness, it's a form of tension. When we have a loose palm or a tense palm, the tense palm takes more internal space. Same thing would happen with these muscles that are contracted. They would take more space or maybe even just wrap down on top of the pathway that the nerves are used to having. All that to say, if all I did was release the fascia in that area, what about the muscles that are also involved there? Have I handled them? It's kind of what I'm saying here, guys. It's not just fascia, right? It's the fascia and the muscles and all the other elements. We get to know our anatomy backwards and forwards. So yeah, I feel like I could go on about that. Simon says, what about frozen shoulder stability versus flexibility? Well, I don't know if you're talking about that, Simon, here about related to fascia, because we're kind of on the conversation of fascia. So feels like you changed subjects on me, which is cool because you have a lot of questions and I love that. But we have talked in Tuesday training about all the muscles of the rotator cuff that do stability and how much is how much of the rotator cuff is actually involved in stability versus the rotation that we mostly think about with the rotator cuff. And flexibility is about muscles, fascia related frozen shoulder. So here's the thing, shorthand. Pause ourselves on assigning a meaning to a diagnosis. Just pause. I didn't say ignore it, just pause. Here's why. All the diagnoses together, there's 409.8 million diagnosable symptoms, most of which have a diagnosis assigned to them. Okay, we're not going to memorize all those. You don't need to. But what you do get to have is really clear, applicable, functional anatomy knowledge. Not like from a book, but how does it apply in the clinical setting to the work you're doing? It's like the researchers at the Harvard fascia conference, it wasn't the Harvard conference, it was hosted at Harvard. It's like the researchers there who had data is not the same as the application of that data in the work that you do. You get to have all the data, the anatomy, and all the application of that anatomy, and don't freak out about diagnoses. They tend to spin us out a little bit, and all a diagnosis is a label on top of a collection of symptoms. You still want to not only recognize the symptoms in that diagnosis more than the name of the diagnosis anyway, but more importantly, you want to find out what caused the symptoms, not whether it's actually frozen shoulder or not frozen shoulder. What caused it is what you want to know. And so when you're asking here, Simon, about frozen shoulder and what it's fascia related, you go back to the anatomy, back to the data. Any muscle that's not moving for 24 hours begins the atrophy process. If the muscle spindles inside the fascia bag begin to atrophy and the fascia depends on the muscle spindles moving to keep the fascia unbound, then wouldn't it automatically conclude that the fascia is related to a collection of symptoms that we would identify as frozen shoulder? Of course, it's both. And you still are not going to solve the frozen shoulder by only going at the fascia. It's a relationship between the muscle and the fascia around it. It's a relationship between the fascia around every muscle everywhere in the body, diagnosis or not. So if I could do anything for you guys, it would be to streamline your knowledge of anatomy and create an application of that knowledge so that you don't spook yourselves when a diagnosis shows up. Because it will. That's usually what happens. If you guys are doing therapeutic work and orthopedic corrections, and maybe you're also doing other things, what you're facing when the therapeutic problem shows up is something that needs to be changed. There's usually a high level of pain, some fear that comes along with that, maybe a long time that's gone by, and possibly even a diagnosis, a label that goes with what it's called. What it's called doesn't really help you with the root of it. All it does is identify the symptoms that they bundled together and put a name on it. So try not to spook yourself about the diagnosis. What is going on in the anatomy is where I want you to be able to have proficiency. What is the anatomy and what's going on with it, and how does that apply to the work that I do? What is the anatomy? fascia, muscles. What's the relationship between the two of them? What's the relationship between a muscle, its fascia, and the other muscles? Because that's how muscles work in concert with each other. And how do I understand all that to be? Then it's gone wrong. And now what does that mean? Totally different. You can't make the leap, guys. I love you. And I mean this from the warmth and of the biggestness of my heart that I can give you. You can't go to solving complex therapeutic and orthopedic issues without your tea bag steeped in anatomy. The answer is not in the complexity of the diagnosis, it's in the simplicity of the anatomy we came with. In order to solve this over here, you got to have all of this here. It's one of the reasons why there's so much applicable anatomy now in our mastery program. And I'm sharing this with you because June is our month. This is our enrollment month. And I made a big mistake with that early on. The very first mastery program I ever held was just straight up to teach practitioners the Schatz method, which is not this anatomy that I share with you on Tuesdays. And when I went to take all these beautiful, talented practitioners on to teach them my methodology, what I realized was they didn't have this anatomy enough and the application of it well versed to even understand what I was saying about the method or to apply it. Huge gaping hole for me. I made a huge mistake. And that's okay. We didn't all get the same anatomy in school. And even if we had, unless we'd repeated it many times and then applied it and then come back to review it to make sure we got it all and then applied that, unless we had done that, we wouldn't have had all the applicable anatomy that was available to us. And you mentioned that earlier, Cheryl, where you're like, reviewing again and still hearing it differently, reviewing again and coming up with more ideas about it. That's the way our brain operates. So even if our primary training, massage school, yoga teacher training, NASM certification, whatever, even if our primary training could offer us all the applicable anatomy that we need, and it doesn't have time for that, we still need to review it enough to actually have it and own it and be like, I know everything about that tissue. Interesting, right? Some of you might not have remembered some of that about fascia. Like, oh yeah, it's not the symptom, it's not the cause, it's the symptom. Huh. Oh yeah, that's right. I got to move the muscles. Do I know how to move the muscle? Wait, what's the lever again? How do I know if I got all the muscles of reciprocal inhibition there? If any one of those parts you weren't 100% on, that's fine. It's good to know. You got to know it because you have to have all that anatomy for all of this to gone wrong and now be presenting you with a whole bunch of symptoms that don't add up in a book because they won't. You won't find all those symptoms in a book. That's why I teach the method so that you can cut through all that noise. You need to have this anatomy to be able to do that. And in our method, in our program, I do give you all this anatomy. It's also why I show up every Tuesday to give you droplets of anatomy as well, so that you can amass all this anatomy to be able to move on to bigger, greener pastures. And if that is something that you want to do, this is the month to consider that because we enroll once a year, July 1st, and I want everybody who wants to go to come to join us because it's a fun, magical ride. Simon, fascial release is without muscle balancing. You know what? That little heart thing is on the screen again. Simon, I can't see what your word is after is. So fascial release is something without muscle balancing. I don't know what that word is. If you could type that sentence just one more time, I might be able to answer you. Okay, and I want to share one more thing with you all before we go. I will answer your question again, Simon, if you type it in one more time and I can see what the question is. I love that big juicy heart there on the screen, but it covers up the last comment. Oh, partial. So fascial release is partial without muscle balancing. Exactly. They're literally intimately connected. How can you do one without the other? And not for nothing, guys. Fascia, if you were to really research just fascia, the data tells us that fascia, to actually move fascia by itself, which you can't do because it's wrapped in the muscle, wrapped around the muscle. Hello. But even if you thought you could segment it out somehow in the body, that's not how the body's designed. You get to know the design. Even if you could, The density of the fascia requires like 2,000 pounds of effort to move it by itself. Are you 2,000 pounds? What? No, it's not going to happen. Of course, it's partial because we know the anatomy tells us that. It's not some guru's idea. The body is the guru. The body is the guru. When you study it and you know it, all the answers, poof, show up for you. That's how it happens. I hope that answered your question, Simon. All right. Next Monday, June 9th, there is a first of its kind training I'm offering for those of you who are next level. So, the way of the master practitioner is what I'm calling it. I'm for the first time, finally, good, Simon. I'm glad that's helpful. For the first time, I'm going to pull the curtain back and I'm going to show you guys exactly what the Schatz method is. Those of you who've been here with me on Tuesdays over and over and over again have thought at times that this is the method. No, no. This is the anatomy that you need to be able to do the method. And I want to make sure there's a clear distinction there. I won't share the method online. I won't give it away for free. I give away plenty for free. Hello, I'm here every week. And I'm also not going to put it out into the Ethernet for anyone to only get partial information about it and not actually have the whole kit and caboodle. So this is the first of its kind training where I'm actually going to outline the whole thing for you. If you are curious, even curious, come to the training. We'll put the link for it actually. It's just a straight up registration link. There's no sales page. I'm not selling anything. There's no sales page, but I will talk to you about it in detail at that class and it will not be released. So, whatever, I'm not even going to defend that. We'll put the link below and it'll take you straight to the registration page. If you want to come live, you're welcome to do that. You've got to be registered for it to get the replay. So even if you think the time doesn't work, and I get it, guys, unless we're training in the middle of the night, we're during training hours. So there is no perfect time for all of us. I totally understand. You can get access to the replay for a short period of time, but you've got to be registered for it. I'm only sending the replay to those who registered. If you want to do that, please come. I'm happy to share that with you. It's Monday, June 9th. And if you're already on our email group, like we already have your email address, you got an email about that either yesterday or today. So you'll have the link there as well. But if you're watching here on YouTube with us and you haven't received the email yet, let us know, or you can grab the link below this video after this training populates. So please join us. I'm not going to do it regularly. It's just this month because we're in this launch window and I want you guys to know exactly what's behind this magical curtain of mastery. And so that's it. And also, June is our month in the club, in our membership club for client work and partnering. So we're also going to be doing some little more complicated orthopedic sessions. There's one of the trainings that's in there this month is architecting an orthopedic session. Like, what are the elements you actually need in your session to be able to walk that through from, subjective intake to the end. And we have a couple other trainings in there as well. So there's a whole new course load that just dropped in our club this weekend, beginning of June. So I want you guys to know that that's there and available for you too if you want to self-guide yourself through some training. And that, my friends, takes us to the top of the hour. Cheryl, do you have any questions for me before we wrap up for today?
I don't.
You don't?
It was
Okay.
really, nope, it's all good. Yeah. Very
Excellent.
clear.
We get to
Yeah.
celebrate Cheryl because she just started level 2 June 1st as well.
Mhm.
Cheryl's in, she wants more. She's like, I want this,
Yes.
I want more of this. So I'm happy to pour into you, my friend. I'm happy. Yeah.
Yep. It's good
You're
stuff.
You're a rock star, darling. So it's just a joy to train with you. I love it. All right, my
Same.
friends, it's a joy to have you all here as well. I look forward to seeing you guys next week, same time, same channel, and in the way of the Master Practitioner on Monday afternoon Eastern time if you want to join us there. And until then, continue to do great work in the world. I'll see you guys next time. Bye for
Thank you.
now.